Hello and welcome to GeekVerse Sidequest, your weekly stop for video game news, reviews, and more here on the GeekVerse Podcast Network. I'm your host, the Squirrel Landlord Dylan Musk, and I have with me Yala's Wild Ride, Den Acolyte, Dante. Welcome back to Sidequest. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here. It's been not too long. We just spoke about God of War 2018, and we're rolling right into God of War Ragnarok, which has been, for me personally, a blast. I'm very curious to see where you land on this time.
Definitely, yeah. I'm gonna skip a lot of the plugs today, but the one thing I wanted to plug was that we did a couple weeks ago. Me, you, and Saris did a retrospective of God of War 2018. Where I think we talked for like almost 2 hours about that game, the combat, the story, everything, full spoiler zone there. So if you haven't listened to that yet, I definitely go back and listen to that, everyone. And we'll talk more about Ragnarok in a bit, but I want to take a quick side note here, just a couple of quick things. One, there was a Nintendo Indie Showcase, whatever they called these days, last week that showed off a bunch of stuff. None of it was that exciting. I think a lot of it was just like, here's a release date for this thing that you've seen before. But the big one was Sports Story finally got shown off again after I think like 2 years maybe of silence, and it's coming out at the start of December. So if you were getting ready for Game of the Year, no way. Here's another thing to throw at you. Did you play Golf Story? I don't know if we've ever talked about this. Are you excited for this at all?
I heard nothing but incredible things about Golf Story, and I'm kind of upset that it just missed me. So I'm wondering if I should actually go and play Golf Story before I play Sports Story. But either way, I'm pretty jazzed about it. I think it looked cool. I know people that I like their tastes like Golf Story, and we're excited about this. So I'm into it. I'm definitely curious to put my hands on it.
Yeah, no, Golf Story is great. It's a game that I feel like I've been chipping away at for like a year and a half, where every like couple months I'll just jump in and do like a quest or two and then come back to it, or maybe I'll get hooked for a week or something like that. Not to say like that's not because the quality of the game is lesser or something. Like I am really enjoying it, but it's just one that I'm content to take my time with. I want to beat that before I go into Sports Story, and also I just have enough to play here at the end of the year, and I think it comes out like the same week as Midnight Suns. So I think I'm going to kick it down the road. I don't think I'll play it this year, but I will absolutely be playing it and probably talking about it on SideQuest at some point. So I wanted to shout that out. And then the other thing was that yesterday, the Game of the Year, the Game Awards, I guess nominees, all those categories got announced yesterday. They showed those off, and me and Dante just want to take a few minutes here to stop by these, because in a couple weeks, me and the rest of the GV crew are going to do official predictions for all these as we do every year. But we're just going to, just look at some of these things. I want to start with the Game of the Year category. I'm going to pull it up on the YouTube here so we have it in front of us. But the Game of the Year nominees for this year are Plague Tale Requiem, Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Stray, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So I want to start with this, which is that in the summer you were on, Dante, and you were on your Xeno journey. You were playing through 1 and 2 in preparation for 3. Where are you in your journey? Are you on 3 yet?
Yeah, I'm like 75% of the way through it. I definitely started to feel a little bit of Xenoblade burnout about halfway through 3, but regardless, I love that game. I absolutely love that game. I just gave it a tiny break. Like that's probably the thing I jump back into when I'm done with God of War Ragnarok. So
nice.
Definitely.
It feels at home in the Game of the Year category.
Yeah, there's a few that make a lot of sense here to me, and then there's a few that I'm just like, how in the world did you get here?
Such as?
Well, Stray for one. I really enjoyed Stray, but I think it's up against some heavy hitters. I think I've been pretty open about my feelings on Horizon. I really like that first game, and the second one I burnt out so fast. My girlfriend, also a huge Horizon fan. I don't think she's played more than like 5 hours of that game. Like there's something about it that is really just not pulling me in the same way that series did originally.
And I played it to the end, and I feel the exact same way. I was not happy with that sequel. You can go back and listen to I think we did 2 podcasts on that earlier in the year. But I'm not shocked to see it here. I think it is of that caliber. And I know that me and you and Travis, who was also reviewing, who was not into it, I feel like we're the only ones, plus your girlfriend now, we're like the only ones I've heard be in that camp. Everyone else is like, oh, it's great. And yeah, it came out next to Elden Ring and it kind of got overshadowed, but still, obviously, it's here in this category. Did you check out Plague Tale at all? I know that's just like a couple weeks old here.
So I was telling myself I was going to go play the first one and then to get to the second one. And then I started to see, I got to stop doing that to myself. I started looking at reviews to see if I wanted to spend my money on it. And I saw it was getting kind of like mixed reviews. And I was like, I think I might pass on it. That's why I was a little surprised to see it here too, because I don't feel like it was, people were like screaming from the rooftops how much they loved A Plague Tale.
Yeah, no, I feel like other than me and Kirkland who reviewed the game, I feel like I didn't see anyone talking about it, so I was very surprised to see it too. And I mean, for me, who all did that same thing, where I played through Innocence earlier this year in preparation for this one, like the sequel was like definitely much worse for me than that original one. I think it missed in a lot of ways from gameplay perspective to the story. I thought was worse. The villains like not good at all. So I'm like really surprised to see it in Game of the Year because I just thought that was overshadowed in general. I thought it might show up in a category or two, but yeah, I mean in general, like when I was in the Discord, we were talking about this a few days ago. Like, what do you think these 5, 6 games are going to be? It's like, well, obviously Elden Ring, God of War, like those are locks. But it's like, what are those other slots going to be? And I couldn't really come up with anything that felt definitive. But like Plague Tale would have been way down the road. I would not have expected that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I have a lot that rise above most of those games, but I think they are all very me games, so it's hard to feel like they would get a fair shake in this group. So I think people would have the same reaction that I did to this list and be like, "What the hell are those doing there?" If they were mine. So,
I mean, I'm with you on Stray 2. I also really enjoyed that game, but I don't think it has any place in this tier. Sure, in the indie category for sure, but I don't know. I guess I can see why it's here. It appeals to a different type of fan, and maybe some of the outlets like that really lent to them, and then they get their votes in here. But obviously, it reviewed super well. Like tons of people played it. It was like one of the best-selling indie games of all time, I think. So like it does make sense that it's showing up.
Definitely enough credit to give it a slot there.
We're not going to go through all of these, but you said you had a couple things you wanted to shout out here. Is there any category in particular?
Best score and music. I'm just very upset with an omission, and there's also we're going to get into it a little bit today, but God of War I don't think needs to be in there. Like pretty
for score and music specifically?
Yeah, I think pretty forgettable, like what's the word? Just like fantasy music. Background score. But like
I almost wonder if part of that is that like the composer, the name behind that, Bear McCreary, who just did Rings of Power, is like a big name right now. Obviously he's just like anything he releases is going to be like set at this high bar. I wonder if that's part of it. I think I actually really did enjoy the music, although I agree with you that there are like several quote unquote snubs. But what is the one that's screaming out to you?
Well, the thing that I was like, man, I can't believe this isn't here, and this might be one of those things again where I'm talking to my own personal tastes, but Neon White has the coolest score of any game I've played since like Jet Set Radio Future. It is so fun, and just like it's entirely composed by an artist named Machine Girl, who I like personally as well. It's like this really like almost like metal influenced like industrial dance music. It's like electronic music, but it's like heavy and weird, and like I just think it's so cool, and it's such a strong part of the style of that game that I feel like it needed to get more shout outs. Luckily Neon White shows up throughout these categories a few times. I really do think that game deserves it, but music was the thing I thought it was going to get a shout out for, and not seeing it was a bummer. Happy to see Metal Hellsinger though. Cool. I really enjoyed that game, and the soundtrack is good enough to listen to on its own. So very, very cool to see that.
The big miss for me in this category was Tunic. I was even just listening to that again today. That soundtrack, that's probably my favorite soundtrack of the year. Not to spoil our category, our best of categories that we're gonna do, but like, man, that music is insanely good and special and unlike anything I've ever heard before. It evokes so much emotion and nostalgia and just intensity when it needs to, like melancholy when it needs to. It is so special. I was maybe bummed it like Tunic does show up a couple times in these awards, but I was like pretty disappointed to not see it in a lot more categories. Like to me, if there was an indie game that rose to Game of the Year in that category, it would have been Tunic for me.
It
And
was
it's
definitely
in a
high on
couple
that
categories,
list.
yeah.
The other thing doesn't necessarily fall into a category that I was like a little upset that I didn't see it in any category. Although it did drop fairly recently, so maybe that's a reason why, is Signalis. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of buzz for that one, for
I
sure.
think that I've beaten it once now, and I think that game should have ended up in multiple categories, like but definitely some of the indie categories. It is really, really just a stunning, very atmospheric situation. Maybe like best art direction, right? I know like Scorn made its way into that.
Yeah, that was an interesting. I was not expecting to see Scorn anywhere.
Yeah, I think Signalis would have fit in there really well as well. But
for some reason, Indie's not opening up on this. Okay, there we go. But yeah, I was curious about this because I saw this game everywhere, and it's been on my list of maybe to play. And I think seeing it in so many categories makes me want to check it out more. But if you played Immortality?
No, but that's the Sam Barlow game. That's
Yeah.
the Half Mermaid, right? Studio. That is something I'm definitely interested in. If you guys aren't familiar with Sam Barlow, he did Her Story, which was an incredible like narrative and really interesting design. The way that you play through that game is very, very cool. And it sounds like Immortality is like the best game he's done since. So
it's on Game Pass, though. I definitely think I'm gonna make time for that one. We're getting down to it here. There's not too much time for many things, but I think Immortality is one that I'm gonna make time for.
Pentiment is the other one that I'm like, God damn, I gotta find time to squeeze this thing in because it's getting like
that's out today.
About it. It's today?
Yeah.
Damn it.
Why do you say that?
Well, just because I have to now, like, I'm still
finishing Xenoblade, God of War.
Finalize Xenoblade and finish God of War, and like
I have Midnight Suns
3 that I'm playing still, and it's just like there's just too many games.
Are you getting Midnight Suns?
Yeah, gonna get Midnight Suns as well. I think the only game in this stretch that I'm skipping is gonna be Pokemon. And I might get that down the road.
Right. A lot of stuff. My last question for you: What do you think of Elden Ring in Best Narrative?
It's a weird one. That's where I love that game. Like that is if you're speaking to somebody who will I will fight for.
Yeah, go back and check out our 3-hour-long spoiler cast on it if you need proof of that.
I will fight for that in most categories. Not this one. It's cool. It's got a cool narrative if you're willing to really dig into it, but like I don't think it's told in a way that is the best in any capacity.
Like because the little blurb here for outstanding storytelling and narrative development in a game, of course, that's vague, and that doesn't mean that everyone in the outlet is specifically looking at that. If like world building was in this, I would be like, oh yeah, sure, I totally get it. But with just that blurb, it's like, I love Elden Ring, I love that world, I love those characters and stuff. But like, man, that is a very strange addition to this when you're looking at the best stories of the year.
Absolutely, yeah, a strange one.
Yeah. There you go. There's the Game Award nominees. Like I said, we'll come back and do predictions for that. It's going to be the week before the Game Awards, so I don't know exactly what date that is, but mark that on your calendar. That'll be fun as usual. And let me stop my screen share there. And let's take. Actually, you know what? Let's get right into God of War first of all. So, like I mentioned, we did our retrospective. If you have not listened to that, a quick recap would be that Dante absolutely loves this game, or at least, he loves the 2018 game. One of your favorites of all time, maybe top 5 all-time games we're talking about here.
It's up there.
I was very much on the opposite side of things where I appreciated the characters and story, but man, that gameplay did not work for me, and it actually dragged the experience down pretty low, or I'd say I'm more negative than positive on it, even if there's a lot of great stuff in there. But once again, if you want to hear the details on why that is, go back and check that episode, because I'm bagging on it, but then Dante and Saris can rise it up to the claim that everyone else seems to give it as well. But here we are with Ragnarok. I'm assuming you're playing on PS5. You said you're about 30 hours in. So we'll leave some spoiler talk for later, but even then, Dante's not finished the game, so we won't spoil the entirety of the story. But what do you think so far?
I really, really love it. I think it is definitely like a there's a lot of games that have sequels that you feel like they're two, or like 1.5 or 1.75. I think this game falls into that category. I think they expand on a lot of what God of War 2018 did right without changing the formula much, without pushing things too far forward. But the things that they do iron out, I think, make for a much better experience for me altogether. I can get into like tons of detail and explain that, but I think we will. So I'm not just gonna like take the reins there. But overall, I am really, really enjoying it.
I love it. As for myself, I gotta say I've really been on a roller coaster with this one, some high highs and low lows, as it were. But overall, I am more positive on this game than that first one. I think the story gets to be more ambitious because we laid the groundwork so much in that first one. And in that first one, there's obviously a lot of lore and Norse mythology, all sorts of crazy stuff going on. But really, if you boil it down, it's like a father and son story. Whereas this game is like, I don't think you can boil it down to a sentence. It's like, we're taking all of Norse mythology and we're throwing it at you. And we're going to go hard on all of this with all sorts of characters introduced to, a lot of people coming back, all this kind of stuff. So it's doing a lot. And I think it's able to actually like nail all of that in terms of the story and the characters. When it comes to, once again, that gameplay, which was the low part for me in 2018, by the end of the game, I gotta say I'm actually in a very similar spot on it. I still think the level design is not very good. I think there's so much filler in this game where it's like, man, so many sequences could be 5 minutes long, or could be one conversation, back in Sindri's house, but instead we go on this journey of like this really in an uninteresting level design with just way more combat than there needs to be and stuff like that. That really like kind of drag it down for me. Sorry, what'd you say?
I was going to say just the level design roast. I'm like, I want to jump in here so bad, but keep going.
We'll get to it once again. In terms of the combat, this is where you're saying this feels like not just 1.5. I think to an extent, like when it comes down to it, there's a lot of the combat that feels like, okay, this is pretty much the same. We've reworked the skill trees, but of course you get a new weapon. We'll talk about that later on. And I think it was kind of the same thing for me with 2018, where like the first few hours I was really into it, loved the combat, loved the variety of it, but I just got burnt out on it, and they throw, in my opinion, too much at you. Like there's so much optional stuff in this game that it's like, just take out some of the stuff from the main quest and people will have that content if they want to go to it. But instead you have like a lot of forced arena battles you got to do over and over again. And so I think once again, that kind of grated on me by the end of the experience. And even though they do throw a new weapon at you and some new tricks, by the end of my 28-hour long journey, I was feeling kind of similarly on it. But more positive because there is some more variety there. I think the skill trees have seen a major improvement. But really, once again, it is that story and the characters that are doing so much for me here. And I was happy to see it to the end. But yeah, definitely still like a rocky road for me. And I don't know. I would love to see this game with like the main story. If we cut it in half, 50%, let's say 60% of what is there, if they just compacted that by taking out some of the filler stuff, reducing just the amount of combat sequences you're forced to do. You can put that in optional content. Go ahead. I think that this could be like an all-time great one for me, but there is just way too much stuff in the way that brings it down. So I'd say in an overall sense, that's kind of where I'm at. More positive, but still, there's a lot that gets in the way for me.
There's such an interesting piece to that I think is like attached for me to God of War as a franchise that makes that kind of like, I don't know that I could feel that way because specifically the combat arenas, right? Like having these like multiple moments where they're like these big throwdowns, like in all of God of War and this one in as well. I think the combat is what I'm coming there for. Mm-hmm. So I want them to put me in these positions. So like, while it is at times getting in the way of telling the story, while I think the old game still had like some solid story, and this game's story is so good that you feel like, man, I just want to get to the next part of the story. This feels like something stopping you. I love fighting in this game though. I really do. Like the combat is like some of the best designed combat in games, and that's always like such a an interesting I think back and forth we have, because you find it to, I guess, get a little tiresome. I am playing, I don't think it has anything to do with it, I'm playing on hard. So I do find that you have to like use the tools. You have to use the tools, and I played the previous game on normal the first pass through, and I still feel like there's some really tough fights. So I don't think that's necessarily
yeah, I mean, I played most of the game on the normal difficulty. I did drop it down to easy. I still, whatever it's called, Give Me Grace, I think is what they call that one. I still died. Like, it is not like some of those boss fights are still a challenge, but I think it is like we are coming to this game for very different things, where I want that story and you want that combat, and like the other stuff is in there, but like there is a primary reason we want to play it. And yeah, it's like, for me, there'll be a sequence where what could be like, it's a very emotional conversation happening between these characters, but then when you take that conversation and it's like given to you one sentence at a time, it's like, okay, one character's going to say this, then we're going to go fight some bad guys, we'll get another sentence, and then you got to do this puzzle, and then we'll give you another sentence. And it's like, man, I just spent a half an hour to do this, which could have been like a really powerful 3-4 minute long conversation with some, cinematics, some camera angles, and like, yeah, it just gets in the way. But I understand there are different, everyone's looking for something different. So I guess in terms of the recommendation of this, I probably would recommend this still to most people, because I know I am definitely an outlier in how I feel about these two games. I would say if you are someone who wants more of the story, I think you're going to get a great story here. If you are someone who was in a similar boat to me, you'd be a very odd man out, who you weren't a big fan of the gameplay, I don't think this is going to change things for you, even if there are going to be some good moments, or like, oh, this is a fun new thing to check out. The game is just long enough that I think you'll get burnt out on some of those things once again.
The formula is the same, right? Like the base formula of this is the same as 2018. I think they, like I said at the top, they improved a lot, but they did not stray from the formula at all. So if you did not like 2018 or had issues with 2018, I think you're gonna have the same issues. It's very likely.
Yeah. With that, let's take our first ad break here, and then we will get back into it. Still not in the spoilers yet, but we'll talk more about the nitty-gritty of it all. Okay. We are back. So, how about we talk about some of that level design stuff? Because you said you had some kind of counter arguments. So I'd love to hear why you feel differently than me.
So I specifically was thinking of you when I was playing through this, and I know it was one of my favorite.
Every doorway, every crack that you're crawling through, every ledge.
I think they do a much better job of that not being the case in this one. Every once in a while, you do lift up a like a fallen over pillar or something like that, but the spaces are bigger. Like, I feel like the spaces that you're forced to explore, especially in the side areas, like in the first game you had the lake, right? And you have to, like, every time you go onto an island, you kind of like lift up a rock or something like that to move your way into the zone, and then you'll fight something, and then you'll climb a ledge, and then you'll open a door, yada yada. But in this one, I feel like there's a lot of situations where, like, you are on like almost like smaller versions of the lake in each of these zones, and there's not as much stopping you from point to point. I'm specifically thinking of Svartalfheim, which is the dwarven space. Like, there is like a lake that's very similar to the lake in Midgard in the first game, and I feel like I was just like riding my boat throughout that place. There wasn't a lot in my way. I am once again playing on PS5, so I feel like maybe if there were those moments where I'm lifting something up or moving something, maybe I'm not feeling it as much, because maybe the animation is slower on the older.
I wonder if that's a thing, because I know that not every time that they're making you lift up a rock or crawl through it, it's not all of those are hiding and loading. Some of them are pacing specific things or whatever it may be. I do agree with you. I think it is quicker, and I think a big reason for that is because not every sequence has like Atreus jumping on your back, or you don't need to vault him up everything now. So everything just feels quicker, and I don't think this was in the last game where you could just like throw your chains of chaos at a thing and like pulls you up a ledge. No. Like that actually is huge. Like that changes the speed of things a lot, and it always feels good. And you'll have those sequences where you're like doing that between like maybe 3 or 4 different objects to get to the top of a sequence. So I agree with you that I think they did speed it up, and that is not as bad for me as it was in that 2018 game, though it is still present. But that argument you brought up is Svartalheim. Like to me, that is my favorite area. One in terms of just the visuals, beautiful. But I just loved walking through that town. I was spending so much time just looking at every individual house and like all the props on the street. Just I absolutely loved that area. So I agree. And even the boat area before you actually get into the town proper, I agree with you there. That is an amazing sequence that I really enjoyed.
Really good world building moments multiple times throughout this game when you're going back into maybe what are they called? Just not zones, but the different worlds. Realms, sorry. When you go into the different realms, having like situations of actual like people live here still. Like I felt like in the first game there was a lot of situations where you were going through this space and it's just like, all right, the people who are here are enemies and that's it. And like it's all just like everything's been strewn to chaos here and there's nothing worth saving, and it's just like I'm going through this just dilapidated area. But like the area with the dwarves, Vanaheim, and then Alfheim again, all have like life in them in a way that I thought was just a really nice step forward. It made me feel like this world is lived in. At Asgard, extremely lived in. Like yeah, just really good development in that just in that way.
I completely agree. I don't know if that was something that I voiced on our retrospective where I mean, I think for me it was largely the level design that makes me feel like I wasn't able to like believe or invest in that world. But a part of it too is that there's just no people around. It doesn't feel like a real place. And I agree with you to an extent. Like I think the dwarven Svartalheim is great. I really liked going through Asgard, as that feels like, wow, there's actually a place here with like a culture and there's a place where people go to have drinks. Like that makes sense. It's all there. But there's still like certain areas like Midgard, which I think makes sense because it's in the Thimble winter, so not a lot of people are hanging around. But I thought it was particularly strange that there's like raiders, and I'm like, what are they raiding? Like, to be a raider, you have to raid to exist, and I don't understand like how they can exist when I have not been shown anyone that exists other than me, and I would fuck up any raider. So obviously they're not making their money off of raiding Kratos and Atreus' house. I give the raiders a pass because I actually love their animations and I love the look of them. That was an enemy type I really enjoyed fighting, but it was something that like stood out to me. I was like, what exactly are these raiders doing here? How do they live?
They did kind of like I think do a bit of a band-aid on making Midgard feel a little more lived in by when you get to Asgard, people being like refugees of Midgard. But that's like the most they did. I don't know. The Raiders are raiding other Raiders at this point, I guess. And then something else just about like the speed. You were talking about the chains and how he's kind of like grabbing onto stuff and it's kind of like zipping him across places. You're not climbing every single ledge. I think Kratos just moves a little quicker. Like I was telling Dylan that I stopped playing. I rolled credits on God of War 2018 in my replay or in my new game plus like an hour before playing God of War Ragnarok, and I was surprised. It is just like if the pace of God of War was a 6, this is like a 7.5. They just like ticked it up just a little bit, so it still feels incredibly familiar. But there is a smoothness to this that I feel like 2018 didn't necessarily lack, but it is a genuine improvement. Like Kratos is cooking it a little bit more. My man's
you would think he's getting old.
I know. They reference his knees a few times, and still, regardless of that, he's picking up the pace. I guess he's trying to catch up with Atreus a little bit more these days. So
I'm glad you mentioned that because it's been a couple months now since I played 2018, and I got to say I did not notice that, but I do feel like there was an improvement to the level design. So I'm sure that's part of it. Is I just feel like I'm moving through things. I feel like there's less doors. Like that was a big thing for me, was these goddamn doors that close behind you. I feel like more doors you open this game actually stay open in this one. So that was a pleasant surprise. You know, similar to this though, once again, for me, there was not a single puzzle in this game that I was happy to have solved. I think more often than not, I was annoyed by them. And, you know, I think for me too, is just like not necessarily the realism, but like partially that, where there's particularly a sequence where you're going through and there's like troughs of water that are shooting water down, and you have to like stop the water and make them hit a water wheel, I guess. But like those just don't make any, like, it's hard for me to solve those naturally because they don't make any actual sense. Like, why would there possibly be a water wheel in a position where no water would ever naturally hit it? Like, that, it's hard for me to solve a puzzle when they're so abstract and like video gamey, that, and it also makes me just, it just makes those places, like, my immersion's broken, to use that easy term in a way. Like, that kind of happens for me. And I don't think it's awful, but there's a lot of water-based puzzles in this game. And I was like, God, once again, like, this is a quick side tangent here, is that, when I asked for questions in our Discord, Superbad Mike wanted us to shout out the accessibility options. And I agree that when you go through that menu, it's like, there's amazing stuff in here. It's like, you can change Kratos to be big and yellow so that he's very easy to see. You can do all sorts of stuff. They have this weird blur on the text, but like, I turned that off because it was,
I turned it off too.
But like, obviously a lot of great stuff there. They even have a section for puzzles where you can, I guess, make it extended, which would mean that you get hints less often. But I was like, man, I would love if there was just a way to just turn off puzzles completely. Like, that's something I would like to see them do, because I never got anything out of these. I would love if I could just zip past them. So that's maybe a bit severe. I think the water one stood out to me, but yeah, it sounds like you're like, maybe you didn't like those ones, but generally you still like.
I did not like those ones, but I do like a lot of the puzzles in this game. They brought back one of my favorite puzzles from the previous game and added a layer to it. So I really liked the axe throwing through the hive pieces. It would essentially, you have to like hit the axe on every single one of the nodes to make it all disappear, or to make so you can proceed through the level. And they added these mirrors in this game, or these kind of like they're not quite mirrors, but they act like those, where you like bounce the axe off of it and it can kind of like hit stuff in different and at like different angles. And I found that just super fun to just like find the correct space and make sure that you're like clearing off spots so you can access more of the mirrors, and you'll have them bouncing off of a bunch of different paths. I thought that was really cool. We were talking about the spear a little bit, but I think those were some of those where you have to hit the spear in multiple spots before igniting it. I'm spoiling a little bit, but
hold back on that. What are you doing?
Yeah, I was gonna say those are pretty damn fun. I don't know. I think it's once again something that's helps pacing though too, because if you were otherwise, it's just fight, climb. You know what I mean? So I think maybe that's an argument in your favor, because if without the puzzles, it does start to distill down to.
I mean, for me though, right? It comes across that I like the puzzles less than the combat. So now it's like, okay, now I got to take time from the beautiful story that I love to do these combat sequences, which, vary. Sometimes I like them and sometimes I get burnt out. But then it's like, okay, now I got to take time, do this stupid puzzle that I don't want to do. So yeah, that's where it happens for me, I think.
I don't know. I like puzzles in games in general. Most of the time, as long as it's.
I like a good puzzle. I like a good puzzle. I do not like these mirror ones. I wish I could be you in this case, but like, I don't know. Give me Outer Wilds. I will solve those puzzles all day long. Give me God of War. I would rather be able to turn it off.
I love Outer Wilds too. I don't know. I feel like a lot of the puzzles, I love Outer Wilds, but man, some of those are more tedious than any puzzle I've ever played in a video game, because you get like halfway through solving it and you're like, fuck, my 30 minutes is over again.
Well, let's leave that aside, because that could be a whole nother tangent for another day.
Absolutely.
Moving along, let's talk about the combat. We're going to leave the third weapon out of it. Dante, you may have mentioned it. We're going to leave that aside for now. We'll come back to it in a bit. Before we talk about the combat itself, I want to talk about the progression a little bit, because they've changed things around here where you still have your skill trees. And I want to commend the game for this, actually, because ever since like maybe 2017 on the podcast with games like Horizon or even Spider-Man, I've just been shitting all over these AAA Sony first-party skill trees that are so stupid. And I would love if they found another way to implement progression into their games, because these systems do not work for me at all. God of War 2018 was mostly similar because it's pretty much the same thing. But I think they've made a crucial addition here that actually does a lot for me, which is that whenever you unlock a skill in this game, you start, I guess, getting they call it like the labor. So you can like essentially every time you use that ability on an enemy, you'll add that up. You're essentially gaining XP for that individual skill, and then you're hitting different thresholds: bronze, silver, gold. At these different thresholds, you're getting XP back, which is cool, and it gets incentive. Okay, I'm going to spend my XP to get this skill, but I can get like a rebate essentially if I actually use it in combat. But then when you get that top tier of it, you can put an extra skill point I guess you'd call it that, an extra skill point on it, or you can modify it with more damage or more stun or more runic. I think there's a couple other ones that can pop up for certain skills. But I really, really like this. It's like it's giving you incentive to actually use the skills you're getting, because I found in 2018, after a while, I was not using any of the things. It's like, oh, this is too much to handle. I'm not playing on high difficulty, so I don't need all this stuff. And it eventually just got to a point where I was unlocking stuff and not using it all, and it just felt like I was kind of wasting my time. But just that little switch of incentivizing me to utilize these things meant that I got more of a grasp of the combat, and it's probably why I liked it more, is because I was using more of the toolkit, even though I was still playing on a low enough difficulty that I didn't need to. But yeah, it gave you incentives to keep using these things and combo them together and stuff like that. So that little change goes miles for me. It does a lot. I really like that.
Funny enough, that's in 2018.
Interesting.
It's not necessarily a change. So it's better explained here, though.
Wow, I had no idea that was a thing in 2018.
So in 2018, instead of it working like you're leveling up the specific skill, which is I think why it is so much more obvious that you're like going just up a threshold and you're constantly seeing that perk or that activate and being like, oh man, I'm working towards something. In that game, you had to like do a specific task with that skill,
like a quest, or
no, it would be like kill 500 Draugr with
okay.
And what would change is you would get like, it wouldn't be like a selectable perk either. It wouldn't be like, hey, this is glowing and click into it. You would just unlock the next, like you would unlock some sort of like attribute within that skill, like generates 15% more frost damage, right? So this being a little bit more involved, I think forces you to interact with it, which is a huge improvement.
Did you get like XP back in 2018 as well?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, you weren't going up in tiers either. It was just like I forget what they call them. It's like they were in the quest log. There's like favors and the main quest, and then they called something else, and I'm totally blanking on it. I wish I could have it like open in front of me here. But
I'm glad you called me out on that, because that just goes to show that even just displaying something to a player differently can do wonders. And it sounds like they still have iterated on that idea, but
totally. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think
that was already there, but they just made it better, and something that someone who's not invested in the combat, feel invested in the combat.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree though. I'm sick of skill trees. I think that was one of my main gripes with the last game. I think some of the RPG mechanics in both of these games are it's nice to have customization. But when you have a skill tree where I think ultimately you end up with the entire skill tree unlocked, then you probably could have done a different path towards this. This is just progression locking. You know what I mean?
It's just become a trend, and that feels like the only reason why it's done at this point. So it's cool that this game's at least trying to do something special with it. And like I almost had everything unlocked by the end of my playtime, but I didn't have all those bonus skills unlocked. So that felt like, okay, that's like if I wanted to go do some of more of that side content, then I would be like specifically, okay, I'm going to try and build up these skills, get these ones prioritized. I'm going to make sure I do the spinning attack so I can get that going as soon as possible. So that's cool.
Yeah. One of the other things about just like the combat that I thought was pretty interesting going from 2018 to this one is some of those skills that were perks in the skill tree are now built into Kratos's just repertoire. Like the charging the axe being held on like a button now, so it like gains more ice, but then also just like the L1 triangle, so like that like empowers the axe or the blades, and it allows you to kind of like do that's actually like a part of the skill tree in this one. And in the previous game, that was my main rune that I had attached to my axe. And I would use that as one of my like runic spells. So I was like, oh man, they just built this into his kit now. This was like by far my favorite. And I must have been they must have done some sort of like research and realized like how many people were using specific runes. And they're like, okay, the most popular ones we should just build in. So
it's like in Deathloop, like make everyone be able to double jump at all times. Like don't make that a thing that you equip.
So just I don't know. I think they really evolved the just your regular toolkit with with the Blades of Chaos and the Leviathan Axe up a little bit. I think in the first game you're kind of learning how to use these weapons, and now they're adding a layer on it, and they're like, okay, we want to add some more opportunities to do combos and just to shift the way that you are playing with these specific weapons.
Right.
In a way that you weren't necessarily in the past. Just adding that extra layer of complexity to them is.
And in terms of the equipment side of things, I don't know if relics or amulets or both of them are new, but to me they weren't familiar. The rest of the equipment system seems to work pretty much the same to me. But as you who are more invested in this, how do you feel about the changes, if any, to the equipment system?
The amulet's cool. It's another like armor slot, which is cool. You did have the slotted armor in God of War 2018. I think you get it. You start to find armor with slots later in the game in the first game.
Sure.
So it's not something that's as prevalent. Whereas here you get them pretty much right off the bat, and then you get a amulet which has, I think, 9 slots in it, and for every 3 you equip of the same type, you get a set bonus.
Would that be like if they're red, they're from the same area? Is that
so
what
like
would make the type?
Like Helheim ones, Svartalheim ones,
Gotcha.
Alfheim ones. They all had like different.
What kind of bonuses do you get if you do that?
They were all over the place. They're really cool. So I think one of the ones that I have make it so that there's like a medium luck activation for on every hit to potentially crit, and then if it does crit, then they create explosions when you kill the enemy.
Cool.
So just like all types of wild stuff like that. Some of them are just like give him 1 kill strength up. Like there's stuff that makes it so your like dodge roll goes farther. All types of stuff. So really good opportunities to customize your play style once again, in addition to what you're already getting from the set bonuses on the armor itself, because the armor also has set bonuses. If you're using like 2 pieces or 3 pieces of the armor, you see a boost to whatever that armor set is good at. So like
nice.
The Helheim one, for example, when you charge up the like Leviathan axe or the Blades of Chaos, it has I believe a higher rate of charging those, and then the chest armor does something specific. So the arms and the legs raise the rate at which you build those up, and then the chest works off of those as well.
Cool, nice. I like that. There's a couple big changes with the combat. So I think at this point we're going to initiate that first spoiler thing. So now we're maybe going past things that you would see in the trailers. Right. We'll leave some of the story stuff for the end, but I want to talk more about these combat things. So one of the biggest changes here, I don't recall this from the trailer, is that, but I think it was kind of like, oh, this is probably going to happen in this game, is that you have sequences where you play as Atreus. So this is kind of, he still has the classic R1 and R2. He swings his bow around like a sword pretty much. You get an additional weapon that I can't remember I don't know if you've gotten to this point yet, but then you're using your bow as your main weapon, of course, with your different runic attacks. So what did you think of playing as Atreus?
I think in the beginning, I found it to be a little limiting, because you do have so many tools with Kratos, because he's pretty much picking up where he left off. So I feel like a lot of those attacks and the fact that you have the Blades of Chaos and the Leviathan axe right from the get-go in this game, you can switch between weapons and keep it spicy. But when you switch to Atreus, you have a little bit less to work with, but his gameplay is it feels very different. Like obviously with the Leviathan axe, you're aiming and throwing those, but he is like a full-on. I've kept feeling like I was playing a Tomb Raider game when I was playing with him, because you do have that kind of like, he's bow and arrow focused. And then his once you start filling out his tree a little bit, he has some stuff. He is like super nimble, really, really fast. He ends up feeling like he has almost as many tools as his dad does. At least where I'm at now. I think I'm assuming I'm like halfway or something like that, but I don't want to know. Don't tell me.
If I say the word Ingrid, does that mean anything to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you have that I feel like adds a lot to where normally with you're playing as Kratos and you can send Atreus to shoot arrows, but instead with Atreus you have the Ingrid the sword, which is attacking stuff, and also has some personality on it, which is always fun.
Totally.
But I mean, I think that added a lot because Ingrid does all sorts of crazy things. We'll send it like a wave attack, or even just chopping people up is like it's just very stylish. I think so. I think that added a lot to his kit when you finally get Ingrid.
Yeah, Ingrid definitely adds to it a ton. I'm not going to get into spoilers, but he does have kind of like something that is a bit of a rage mechanic, like his father does, that I think is super fun to use.
Oh, we're spoilers deep now. You can go for it.
Okay, all right. So Atreus leans into the. I loved this. Because in the first game, the second he figures out he's a god, he's like, "Can I turn into an animal?" In the cutest like little kid way, and then out of nowhere it's like, oh fuck, he can turn into an animal. So he's like turning into like a wolf during combat and just like ripping things heads off. It's shorter than his father's rage timer is, so you're kind of in and out and back into regular.
I'm sure you can get like some buffs for that too, though, at some point.
Yeah. Hopefully. So it definitely I don't know, I feel like he has variety. He's like he's got his melee attacks that he's like creating stun with his bows, and then he's going in with the bow and actually hitting him with it. There's this amazing like combo attack that I unlocked for him where it's like R1 4 times and then R2 twice, and he is just flipping around all over the place. I thought it was, and he ends with a bow shot at the end of the combo.
I love his finishers, like the one where he kicks him away, kind of crouches down on a knee, shoots him. That was really cool.
Exactly, that one. Yeah, and then he has some ensemble cast every once in a while that come and help him out that I think are that you don't get to control them up to the point that I'm at, but you do, like most of the time when you do have a companion character in these games, the first game and this one, Square controls them, whereas like we spoke of, that is Ingrid in this, which is a really fun sword with a bit of personality. And but the ensemble cast that does join him in combat sometimes does like fuck some shit up every once in a while. They come in and start doing some damage, which is really nice.
Yeah. I mean, for me, this was perfect. And I the thing that actually spoiled me on this, funnily enough, was the accessibility menu, because I was going through it, and when I was talking about how you can change the color of Kratos, it doesn't say Kratos color, it says hero color. So I'm like, well, of course there's that means there's someone else you play as other than Kratos, and that's probably Atreus. So little spoiler there. But I love this because it was like right when I was once again like getting burnt out on the combat a little bit, they gave me a new character to play as. And look at Horizon, Ghost of Tsushima, even Elder Scrolls, Grounded right now. Like, I love a bow and arrow. Like, that is just such a classic video game weapon. So much fun. So I really like that. Plus, he has, the different runic attacks on there that add to it. But I agree. The animations in this game are fantastic. I don't know if we've mentioned that yet, but obviously this game looks great. The animations in general, like obviously they use a lot of mocap for certain kind of more character moment sequences, but I think it really stood out to me with Atreus in particular, because obviously Kratos, it's like mostly the same as that first game. We're kind of used to it at this point, but just the desperation and like how much he, like, sometimes when he swings, he's like almost falling over, he's like tripping on one leg and stuff like that. There's something to it that like adds to his character as well, where sometimes he just gets really riled up and angry and angsty. So that adds to it as well. But yeah, I think they did a great job with making Atreus really fun. And every time I got to play as him, I'm like super into it. And hopefully that is the case for most people. I think just the variety alone probably adds enough. But as you mentioned too, like, playing as the wolf is very fun, even if it's like a pretty basic moveset. It's just, once again, the animation quality is so good. Totally. Like, that was the thing that stood out to me in general. Just like animals moving in this game, whether it's a bear, whether it is the wolf, whether it's Radakovsky, the squirrel, like that, it looks so fucking good. Like, better than maybe any other AAA game I've ever played in my life. And I've played a lot. So that is a testament to how good the animation team is.
They're exceptional. There are moments where you could take a snapshot of this and you'd think it was like just some hyper stylized reality. It's absolutely gorgeous, especially on PlayStation 5. I feel like though they must have, it's scaled incredibly well. It sounds like the PS4 is still like, I was looking at like a video of them next to each other, and it just looks like maybe fidelity is a little lower, and obviously it's probably like suffers some frame rate drops every once in a while. But
for me it feels like a bit of a cheat because I got a new TV in the last month, which is bigger and higher def. So I feel like the game does look a lot better, but that's because I have a better TV than anyone. I played 2018 a couple months ago, so that's probably part of it. But yeah, I mean, the game does look fantastic. Like, just a little thing. This isn't new anymore. Death Stranding did this, even Horizon, even in the first God of War. Is like, man, trudging through snow. I just never get tired of that. It's so much fun. It looks so good. And like, I really like the Fimble winter version of Midgard, which is already very snowy, but they just like added more snow in here, and like it just looks
Froze
great.
the lake.
I love trudging through there. Yeah, the icy lake too looks fantastic.
For sure, a winter wonderland.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I think I guess maybe the next thing now we should go back to Kratos and talk about that the Dropnir spear, which is a great name. A lot of great names in this thing. And yeah, at first I was like, man, I do not like this thing, but it was like within a half an hour, I quickly turned. I was like, I actually really like this. It feels less brutal, I guess, than his other weapons, like an axe or like the Blades of Chaos are just very visceral weapons, whereas the spear. He's still like obviously very burly kind of guy, but it feels like a more delicate kind of weapon. So when he's swinging it around, it looked a bit strange. And I think the mechanics around the actual ranged part of it felt weird to me at first, where it just felt a bit slow, I guess, because you have to throw and then explode to get like the full, and you want to throw multiple times before getting that explosion. But I got to say, the more I've used it, the more I did really like it. And by the end of the game, I still favor the axe above all three of them, but I was switching between them. I like that the Dropnir spear is it's a quicker ranged weapon, right? Than throwing the axe, waiting for it to come back, all that kind of thing. So I think that adds a lot to it as well. And then, yeah, I mean, I guess it adds some more to the traversal of the game in a way that is, to me, not sluggish, which is great. Just quickly throwing a spear into something to either blow something up or use it as a Prince of Persia vaulting pole, whatever.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
So yeah, I'm guessing, is this like has he used a spear in a previous game, or is this kind of a new thing? I'm curious. And then what did you think of it?
I don't think there has been a spear. Which is there. I feel like there has to have been. I'm definitely misremembering. There's no way they got this far.
Maybe he uses it as a projectile only, but you never like use it as a primary swinging weapon, I guess.
I just don't remember a spear. I don't know why. I'm gonna have to dig into this and look at some of the weapon types from the previous games, because I've played all of them and I don't remember a spear in any of them.
I'm sure now if I Google God of War spear, I'm just gonna get Ragnarok stuff. So I don't know, it might be hard to
get. So like I even remember, like I feel like I remember a shield. I remember like a Spartan shield in the other ones and not a spear. So maybe they've just danced around the spear forever. Regardless, I felt similarly to you. I felt like I was like, man, this feels a little underpowered initially, but I think once you do feel it out and understand it, the time to kill is pretty similar to the other ones. It's just you have to like the way that the spear works is it's constantly like making mimics of itself. So he can like throw them out, and he can throw out a bunch, and you essentially throw the spear, it implants it into the enemy, and then you press triangle and he like slams the spear on the ground, and it makes the other spears that have been implanted in the enemies explode. So once I realized that like you could like load up like 3 or 4 into an enemy and then just press triangle and it just kills them, I was like, oh man, this is actually like really powerful, because like when you use the axe, it's like, okay, I'm gonna sit here and juggle this dude for a little while until he's dead. That thing will smoke some of the higher level enemies. It's just a matter of the trade-off in that weapon is one that I'm rarely willing to give up, because I don't want anybody to get too close to me. Is funny enough, as a spear, the melee range of it is the shortest of the 3.
Sure. Yeah, that is a weird point I hadn't really thought about.
So I don't reach for it a ton unless I'm like just trying to get something that is like far away. Something that I think is a benefit of the level design in this is the way that the enemies interact with the levels is a little bit different. They will be up on ledges more often. Yeah. They will make you kind of like.
That's a good point. The arenas are a lot more vertical and interesting. Not all of them, of course, but like generally some of the set PC ones feel more thought out than just like a big circle.
Yeah, so up until that point, you're just like, all right, I'm just gonna throw and catch this axe for a while, unless I feel like trudging my way over to that guy and going and getting him. But once you get the spear, it's just like boom, 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 and you just explode him, and then you keep on with your moving with your I don't know, you're murdering.
Yeah. It's one thing that I don't think this is really necessarily a knock against the spear is for me, like the moment in 2018 when you get the Blades of Chaos is obviously a huge story beat. Just the reason Kratos is going back to the house, the fact that they were there the whole time, and the whole time he's just like freaking out on the way back to Atreus and all this stuff. So I don't think this one is quite the same, although there is still quite a bit of a big story implication when you're going there with Brock and what's going on with him and Sindri. So yeah, I still think it was a pretty good moment, but it's pretty hard to match that of 2018. I mean,
Totally. Yeah.
it's like a top tier like reveal in a game, I guess, right?
There's so much weight behind that. The Blades of Chaos, and just him. He still references at times the pain that those things caused him. You see him like strip it all off, like Kratos like dumping all of his weapons at a few different moments, and then he just like sits down and looks at his hands, and you just see the like scars from the old chains. It's still powerful.
Yeah. Moving on to, I guess, let's talk about some of the boss fights here. I won't spoil any of the late game ones, but you know, one thing that one of my criticisms of 2018 was I felt like some of the larger scale boss fights didn't really work so well. Particularly the dragon is a fight that I didn't really enjoy. I think that it exists here still for some enemies, particularly the elementals. You fight them a couple of times. Nidhogg was one where I was like, oh man, I do not like the flaily nature of these fights. But two that very much worked for me, and this is getting maybe more into spoilers here, is Gryla. That whole sequence. We can talk about that level in a bit here when we're talking about more story stuff. But also, I think Garm is the name of that wolf. I really like those two fights, and it was cool to have like a couple large scale fights that really worked for me here, because I don't know if I really got that in the first one.
And then just like there's so many smaller boss fights along the way, or like harder enemies that like I think this was specifically something I asked for in the retrospective podcast, where I was like, I wish they just gave you more situations where it is just like the Valkyrie fights, where you are just kind of like mano a mano going against a really, really tough enemy. There's so many of those fights in this game, like where it does feel like not at that caliber necessarily, but they feel more like Dark Souls fights, where you are going up against a challenging enemy that has a diverse move set, and it is about like pattern recognition and like making sure that you can make your way through the entire fight and memorize those patterns. And whereas in 2018 it felt like there was gimmick fights, which I still had a lot of fun with. A lot of those, like I did like the dragon fight, but this is such a far cry from that. Like I think all of the even like larger scale fights, you are, instead of being forced to just like do the gimmick, you have to play the game well. I actually think, is it Grala, the grandmother, right? Or
yeah,
her
something
name.
like that.
But she's one of the few where I do think it's more of a gimmick fight, but it's interesting.
It's just such a cool like set piece that like in that case I was able to get over the gimmicky nature of the fight. But I also like the idea of like, gotta get this pot out of hand. Like I don't know, there's something silly about that worked for me.
That whole like part of the game in general is like out of nowhere. I was like, I'm in like a Pixar movie or something. There's a tonal switch. There is a definite tonal switch here, but yeah, regardless, I just think they've added so many more fights that really do make you use your entire all of Kratos's tools. Like I found the combat encounters in this to be just way more engaging for me personally. Specifically some of the harder boss fights or mini bosses. You were talking about the runic, like the one that you have to like end up killing the pillars. You know what I'm talking about? You have to fight one of them on the way to the north, or
yes, I think they're called the elementals.
Yeah.
I've fought a couple of them at this point. I would not be surprised if there's more in the optional parts of the game.
There's a few more. They have different elements, obviously. Sure. And I really liked those fights. I thought that like when I first started fighting them, I was like, oh my god, this is impossible. Especially like some of them have more than one rune you have to break. Some of them have like 4 you have to like kill throughout. And I just thought those were pretty novel. Making it so you're not actually fighting the enemy, you're like just bringing his stagger gauge all the way up and then going and handling stuff in the environment. And then there's a Valkyrie equivalent that is they're brutal. They're brutal.
What are the names of those guys?
I have to look them up.
Okay.
They're like they have an interesting name here. I'll get it really quickly.
Because I did one optional fight against it was in that Svartalheim sequence when I went to, like, when you're just cruising around because Mimir asks you to go check out these forges, and there's like one of these bosses on a random island. I'm wondering if that's one of them, because I saw another one at some point and he messed me up, and I was like, these PS4 load times, I do not want to do this. So I was out of there. But that first one, even that first one, I did do like 5 or 6 attempts. I'm like, I'm gonna say I did a little bit of this, bonus hard bosses, and I'm curious if these are them.
So you get a in Midgard, you get a sword hilt as a part of a side quest. And there are these like little graves that you can stick the sword hilt in, and then ice pillars shoot up and create an arena. And there are these large like skeletal warriors that you fight. I'm trying to remember.
Right, I fought one of those. I think I gave him one attempt and I got wrecked. I was like, no thanks, I'm out of here. I think I fought him very near the end of the game. So I at this point I was like, okay, I kind of want to see this thing through. At this point, but yeah, I'm glad that you're enjoying those. So, are they? They're difficult. Are they as good or as interesting as the Valkyries? Can you say yet? Or do you feel like
I think they're on par with
designed?
the Valkyrie fights. I think they differentiate them more, which is good. Like some of them will have like ice attacks, some have poison, some have ads. Like, which is something that the Valkyries did as well, but it was more just like ads, or this Valkyrie will use that attack more than this attack, whereas these have like out of nowhere I'll be like, yo, the other guy could not do this at all. Like that is an entirely different move set. So I really am enjoying. They feel like a step up from the original Valkyrie fights for me.
Nice. That's good.
See if I can find their damn names real quick without spoiling myself.
I will say too, without
bosses lists and not a lot of optional bosses lists.
Right, there you
go. Here.
I don't want to spoil anything for you, of course. I'll say of like the end game fights in the game, one of them didn't really work for me, but the other ones did. So I'd say that I give it a positive rating for the end game fights. And I do want to do another just maybe shorter spoiler cast with you when you are done the game, because there are a couple things with the story that I really need to deliberate on. I really need to talk about. So of course we'll get there at some point, but just putting that out there that, we'll probably talk some more about some late game stuff at a later date, perhaps.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm sure there are lots of big moments to come.
Well, let's take our last ad break and we'll come back and talk about the story up to where you are, story and characters, to close out this episode here. Okay. We are back. So I feel like I'm going to be walking on eggshells a little bit here because I don't want to ruin anything for you. I do feel like I have pretty detailed notes, so hopefully I don't spoil anything. I will try to be careful. Is it too broad to just ask how you're liking the story so far?
No,
you're about halfway through, or I don't know if that's true at all. It's so hard to say because you're already 10 hours past me in terms of playtime, and obviously we have very different experiences with this game, so it's hard for me to say where exactly you are. But how is this comparing to 2018 as a overall story?
I am really, really enjoying it. I would say I'd maybe put it on par, if not maybe enjoying it a little bit more at this point in the game. I feel like in 2018 it was much more about the relationship between Atreus and Kratos, which is still the case, but you have a much larger ensemble cast. It seems like the stories are interwoven in ways that each person has their own struggles, and those are very interesting. Some of my favorite moments in the game don't have Atreus around, which I was pretty impressed with. I thought that like their relationship was going to be like the end all of like what pulled me through, and now I'm more interested in like these two people or these two people, and it's I found that to be really just engaging. The dialogue is still like some of the best ever. This writing is still absolutely stellar. I do think I kind of mentioned it previously. There are some points where I was like, oh, the tone here is a little shifted from.
Okay.
I think it has maybe a more disjointed tone than 2018 did. I think there was a clear path, and we were barreling down.
More ambitious story, without a doubt. There's a lot more moving parts in this one.
Yeah, but there are a few moments where I'm like, it feels like they cut away, and it's like, all right, now we're here, and things are less serious, or the tone will shift to being a little bit more like optimistic and happy than it is just this dreary story about the death of his wife and the death of Atreus' mother. It's still plenty of opportunities to get mad at Atreus for doing some stupid shit. I'm glad that he didn't change up too much along the way when it comes to that, because I feel like in the last game there was a lot of me just getting mad at that little kid, and there's a few times where I'm like, what are you doing? So I don't know. I think the characters have also grown, but they're still themselves at heart. So you're not necessarily getting like a brand new Atreus or like a brand new Kratos, but I think the expanded cast does a lot for it.
Love that. I think I'm in a very similar boat to you. There's a lot, because we're talking about the ambition of this. There are more storylines going on, I would say, and of course, if you dip into the optional stuff, I'm sure there's a lot more there. There's one of these kind of main stories that I don't want to even say what it is for the spoiler's sake, that I don't know how I feel about it, and that's why this is honestly the main reason I want to do another cast with you when you've got there, is because like this is the biggest piece of the puzzle for me on like where I fall on this game. I think is like, is there good reasons for this thing, and like if there is something that I didn't see to it that could really add to the game, but it also could deteriorate depending on how it takes. So I'll just say that in a very vague way. But with that, we're going to break open those spoiler gates a little bit more. So Dante's to the point where I think it's the chapter after Reunion, whatever.
Yep.
I think Reunion is the name of the previous one, and maybe that's the one you're on now. But the second visit to Vanaheim, we'll say. So if you are still playing the game, haven't got to that point, add us to your watch later, put us on pause, come back and check it out when you got there, and then hopefully we can do another cast in the future talking some more endgame stuff, but we'll get up to that point. So I think one thing that really surprised me about the story is how often, because you mentioned this, that your favorite parts of the game are maybe when Atreus isn't around. I think that really surprised me, is how often Kratos and Atreus are apart in this game. They're off on their own separate journeys at some point. One, because Atreus wants kind of some more freedom. He wants to do his own thing. And Kratos is either not having it, or there's a big commentary between the two of them about trust and this lack of trust. And then, well, I don't trust you because you're lying. And then they kind of go in circles, spinning wheels on that kind of idea back and forth. So that was definitely a big surprise for me. Maybe I want to talk about some of these things with Atreus in particular. And let's go to where your nickname takes us, Yella's Wild Ride. Because I've not heard much on this game. I like to go to these reviews, without having my thoughts, spoiled by anyone else. But one thing I've heard is that people were like really enjoying the game. They got to that sequence and they're like, oh, I do not like this. This is like a pacing killer. So you've called it Yella's Wild Ride. This is the sequence with Angrboda in the Ironwood. Do you like this sequence, or is your name kind of facetious? You don't like it?
It's facetious. It was incredibly. It just slows the whole pace of the game down. It is this just like it really is this like charming Pixar moment that it goes on for so long. I'm sick of being on this yak. Yalla is the yak. You're just collecting food for the animals, and there's really great moments in that. There's tons of excellent, like I think honestly you're waiting for a moment like this throughout this game. You're getting a lot of information about the giants and where they are left, and like what their life was like, and then just also a lot of information about like who Atreus truly is. And sadly it is wrapped up in this thing where you just sit on the back of a yak and trudge through water and press X every once in a while. It is surprising, I'd say. I think this is like one of the kind of not being a little extreme here, but like really a sour moment in the game as far as gameplay goes. I think the story there is still great, but yeah, just underwhelming for sure.
It's funny you mentioned this, where it almost feels like our thoughts on this game are like scripted at some points, because like this is one of my favorite sequences in the game for me. And the reason is because there is still combat here or there, because the game is not confident to let the player go 10 minutes without fighting, but there's a lot less of it. And there's no annoying ass puzzles. For me, that's what I love. I love that I got to just exist in this place. There was very little disruptions to the story. These two characters are getting to talk. There's a lot of lore information here that really could come off as exposition, but instead, to me, just felt like a genuine conversation between two characters, one of whom, Angrboda, is like very mysterious in where she comes from, and she is, taking her time to reveal information to you in a way that really worked for me. I really liked that character. First of all, that name, I fucking love that name.
Yeah,
it's such
absolutely.
a fun name.
That whole zone is gorgeous too. Like I remember,
Ironwood's cool.
I pulled my girlfriend into the room. We were started pointing out. She's a florist, so we started pointing out different flowers in there. Like a lot of the flowers are real flowers. So
that's cool.
We were like, oh my god, that! Oh my god, that! Oh my god, that! Beautiful, beautiful zone.
But yeah, I love that the story element to this, where obviously you're kind of getting unloaded information about what's going to happen, this destiny of the giants and Atreus and Loki in particular. But I really love the opposite side of that, where Angrboda feels like that her life's purpose was to do this. It was to give Atreus this information for the rest of his life. And she feels like there's really nothing, like that was all that was given to her. And there's like this pit, this emptiness to her, this hole, because of this information. And I think that's like very powerful, because it's kind of like an understated performance from her on and how she feels about that. But she clearly does not feel good about that, because there's like her whole life has led to this one moment, and now it has happened. So what is left of her life, I think, is like a very intriguing, like captivating story piece. And that's just kind of like the opposite side of the coin, where obviously you're mainly there to hear what's going to happen with Atreus and that storyline. So I really like that element of the story. That really worked for me.
Yeah, I as far as like story moments, still I think that is an excellent one. It's just what you're doing to to absorb that story is just less
That's
do,
fair.
less more listen. But her demeanor throughout that period changes in a way that is like really heartbreaking. Like she's so excited and clearly like happy to meet him, and like she's been looking forward to this, like you said, her whole life. And then you just start to see her like almost resent him near the end, or just get frustrated with him very quickly. Specifically, one of my favorite moments, because I thought this before she even said anything, and then you realize what they are, and I'm like, you dumb. Oh my god, Atreus pisses me off so often, but like in a way that I think it makes him a good character. Where she's handing him these marbles that have like really serious significance.
Yeah.
And he's picking it up, reading it, and chucking it back in the bag really hard over and over again. And I'm just like, she hasn't even told him what they are yet, but is giving him something and telling him how important they are. And then he immediately just starts tossing them around like in a way that is like nearly like he's going to break them. And then he figures out what they are. And I don't know why I'm still dancing around spoilers, but you figure out what they are, and they just have so much significance. They're everything he's been looking for as well, in to a large degree. And you just realize like she hated this entire moment. She did not want to hand these over.
Well, I think the other side of it too, right, is like, once again, her whole life is leading to this moment where she has to reveal this information and not even like help him. Like that's literally her job is done as soon as that. But he is just completely rejecting it, saying that it's wrong and it's false. So that, of course, the second-hand meaning to that is that like her whole life's purpose was a lie and meaningless, and she didn't need to do any of this, and she could have been doing absolutely anything else. So that to it works too well. I like what you mentioned with the giant marbles. I think that's a very good scene as well, because he's so funny. And like, I don't know. I really like that visit to Gryla's house. I'm playing Grounded obsessively right now. I played Tinykin earlier. I love that setting of being the little tiny character in this huge world. So it was fun to go on this. What is admittedly like a pretty short sequence that doesn't have a whole lot of interesting level design or anything. You're just kind of going through it. But once again, that worked for me. That I just get to exist in this place. And there's also something happens there that you kind of alluded to on our retrospective, which was that at one point Atreus gives. I guess uses one of those marbles or one of the souls of the giant, puts it into a snake who, I mean, that's kind of what you were talking about in the retrospective, right? Is that like somehow Atreus is like the father of the world serpent? And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. That we were talking about, like, what is the logic of that? And you're like, I don't even know. I just know that's a thing. But it's like, okay, that's a cool little breadcrumb. And I feel like I maybe wouldn't have had that connection were it not for our conversation previously, where it's like, man, that is an interesting detail. And I don't understand what's going on here with time travel and all that kind of stuff. But this is still a very interesting breadcrumb to just drop right here in the middle of this sequence and then get into and all this.
Yeah, it's so funny because when you go like deep diving into the wiki and stuff like that, it calls the world serpent like that their parents. And I was just like, wait, and like I wonder if this was also a way to relate these things and at the same time be like, you guys didn't know what was going on. Relax. We're gonna shift it up just a little bit. Like it's not actually their kid, but they are the reason for its existence. So yeah, just I don't know, super cool moment. I'm happy that they are tying some really nice threads or tying some bows on some storylines, some like fan theories and stuff like that, and really giving you enough information to maybe come to conclusions without leaving these things just like wide open. Specifically because, and I know you probably will chomp at the bit after me saying this, but don't. Is the fact that this was supposed to be originally a like a trilogy, and this is apparently it. So
they're done with the Norse mythology era of things, right?
Yeah. So very, very interesting stuff.
Let's stay on the side of Atreus here, and let's zip up all the way to Asgard. This is another sequence where he is on his own. Now, without digging into the stuff past where we are, I got to say Odin as a villain, like amazing job here, really, really works for me because it is unlike any villain I can think of in a video game. I don't know if I could think of one like this where, this whole time they're talking about how Odin is such a piece of shit. We have Freya, whose like life has been destroyed by him. We have all these characters
everyone.
Everyone has a tie to him, and how somehow this guy has screwed them over in some way, and you can't trust him. And of course, Atreus goes across everyone in his party, goes to Asgard, has these conversations, and I feel like as a player, I was in that same boat where I was falling for it too. I was falling for his charm. I was like, oh, he seems like such a great guy. Like he's got these good things. And of course, under the surface, I'm like, there's got to be something more to it. And, get to that later on in the game. But like just the performance is super good. I love the amount of charisma he was able to portray. And then he can be scary when he needs to, but not in a way that Baldur is scary. Like he sets himself apart in a completely different way. So without talking about odds and the ends of this game, like Odin is such a successful villain.
Oh my god, yeah. So like equal parts like charming, but then also like has this intimidation factor despite being this kind of like scrawny old man. Like the way that he talks to Thor is just, it makes you realize like, oh, there's something about him that is probably still very dark. Because when he's interacting with Atreus, he's so believable. He's so just like likely manipulating him in a way that is it's believable. It's like, wow, like maybe this guy isn't all bad. Maybe these people, and like when you're dealing with Thor's daughter and she's like, oh, of course the people that you're listening to, his defected advisor and his ex-wife are the people who are going to say negative things about him. It's like, yeah, I guess I have had a bit of a biased interaction with him so far. And then you meet him and he's like, this guy's not so bad. But then you start to think about things more and you're just like, okay, no, he has done unthinkable things. This man has done genocide more than once. Like there's not necessarily as he has to be putting on a show. or and it's just so effective. Every time he's on screen, he kind of like steals the show. Like anytime Atreus is sent to his study, I'm like, yes, like I cannot wait to talk to this dude. Yeah, he's menacing for sure at times as well. So
what do you think about the rest of the Asgard crew? We got Thor, of course, Sif, Thrun, Heimdall, the Midgardian friend. I can't remember his name, Skjold or something like that.
Oh yeah, it's definitely some like Norse tongue twister.
I think I'm about 50-50 on these. Like half of them are characters I really enjoyed, half of them have some moments, but overall I'm like, I don't know if this was super successful. But where do you land on the Asgardian characters?
I like a lot of them. I even the young kid, the one that you just mentioned, who becomes like, it's cool to see Atreus meet other kids. It feels like such a lonely world for him, and it's a really cool just experience to see him kind of like interact with people his age. So he's interacting with Thor's daughter. He had previously killed her brothers, which is very weird because she walks in very intimidating, like she's going to be mean to him, and she's like, I hated them. Essentially, or like doesn't have as much respect for them, and kind of
one thing they should have worked on is her. Anytime she's walking, her swords are just clipping through her body like crazy.
They are for sure. But like her, I liked really interacting with her. I think it's cool to see her just like they both have ambitions, and you can see them just trying to like grow within the space that they're in, and get Odin to trust them so that they can achieve their goals. Thor is just this wonderful piece of shit. He is. He also is one of those people that I think anytime he's on the screen, he's stealing the show. Whether it be him interacting with Kratos or interacting with Atreus, he is just. He clearly hates them both.
I thought it was Josh Brolin was the voice of him too.
Oh, is it?
Like, no, it's not. It's not. But I was like, this sounds and like has that gravitas of like a Josh Brolin villain. Who obviously it would be funny because he played Thanos, who like Thor was a big enemy of, and Infinity War, like all this stuff. It would be a fun connection. But it's not actually him, but like it sounds a lot like him.
Such a great far cry from the Marvel Thor as well. Like it's just a really completely
much different
character
type of character.
And just it's nice to have that just that stark difference, because it's something that people are generally pretty familiar with nowadays. And to give you this like stark contrast is pretty dope. He is just this near alcoholic, gruff, just bitter man. And he just wants to like, he's another one that kind of similar to his brother Balder. He seemingly just wants to get scrappy and just like fight. Like he just wants to battle. Which is I don't know. Not necessarily a great trait.
I'm a big fan of him. Very, very fun character. Very well written. Thrun as a character, I think she's very fun as well. I like the dynamic too of Atreus commenting on he's encountered a Valkyrie or two in his day, and she's like aspiring to be a Valkyrie. There's obviously some hidden tension there, and obviously the tension with her brothers and all this kind of stuff. So I like that character. I think Sif is one that kind of falls by the wayside. Like she's just a very one-dimensional character.
Totally.
That Midgardian friend, I just found him so annoying. I was like, anytime this guy is on screen, like 10 seconds into that character, I'm like, I'm not gonna like this guy. And I was correct about that. And then I think Heimdall's one that I feel iffy on, right? It's the classic thing where he is intentionally a very annoying character, and it's like in any form of media, movie, show, whatever it is, it's like characters like that can obviously be very successful, and it's like, okay, for them being annoying, they are annoying me and it's working, but it can also go the opposite way where it's like, I understand this is intentional, but it is actually just annoying me and I don't like it.
Right.
And I think Heimdall, unfortunately, by the end of the game, dipped into that category for me, where I was like, God, I am done with this character. But I think that opening scene, when he, first grabs Atreus from the wall, like I think that opening sequence is fantastic and like a great introduction to the character. And I like his look. I like his purple eyes. I think there's a creepiness to them. And obviously he's very intimidating the way he dodges all your attacks in that little fight scene. So yeah, a character that maybe more iffy, although, he does have a lot of content to him. So I think there is some good stuff there. It's just overall, maybe iffy.
Yeah, so far he hasn't quite crossed the line yet, but he has definitely pissed me off every time he's been on screen. So he has been successful so far for me. He is an absolute ass, and he is just so annoying on how just snarky and just a bully. That he is such a bully. In a way that is it's frustrating to see him around, and the fact that like for most of the game and to where I am at, there's nothing that anybody can really do about it. He is like infallible almost. He knows everything that's going to happen, so he just dodges or has a quip ready for you if you're gonna whatever you're gonna say. He's frustrating.
And maybe some closing thoughts on Atreus from me. There's other sequences where you're spending a mission with Sindri. You have a conversation with Freya. I really like all that stuff. Like Atreus is such a successful character for me. Whether it's those scenes with Kratos, obviously would be the highlights. But I think in this game, that's actually maybe not the case for me. I think towards the end of the game, obviously you're kind of reunion as the chapter would be called. You're spending more time together, and all that stuff works for me. So yeah, really good job with Atreus here. I'm glad that he got promoted to playable character. Totally. And yeah, just really great job with him. Do you have anything else on Atreus, or should we move into the? Obviously, there's so many moving parts. Everything's kind of connected in a way, but anything else on him specifically?
Not necessarily. I agree. I think they did a really good job breaking things up with him and allowing him to grow on his own a little bit. I think that creates an interesting dynamic. He's a bit smothered by Kratos for a lot of it, and allowing him to kind of just go and do his thing and understand maybe why he becomes the god of mischief is kind of it's fun to see him take those turns and rebel. Him
having more freedom and then having to deal with the consequences of his actions, I think is a simple thing that is done like very effectively in this game, as a lot of repercussions happen based on the decisions that he makes throughout this thing.
Absolutely.
Moving along, let's talk about Kratos some more here. I'm trying to think about what specifically. I think maybe we'll start with maybe this kind of dynamic between Kratos and Freya, because I love that the opening of this game is just Freya being scary as fuck, tracing you down, trying to kill you. So I really like the opening of her character, and eventually, she turns things around, but not without a lot of work along the way, a lot of truces being formed, a lot of conversations, and more digging into each other's pasts and finding stuff out about each other. But I think particularly that was maybe like the standout relationship. Now, I think there's maybe my one asterisk on this is in the first game, I love Freya. I think the performance is amazing the whole way through. I feel more iffy on it this time around. I just think that every time there's like a scripted sequence in which there's like clearly mocap happened, I think Freya is fantastic. I think when you're actually progressing through levels with her, there's something really weird with her performance that it just like, there's something about the way she talks that is just really weird to me and kind of took me out of it. And I don't know if it's something where it's like, okay, when she as an actress is like in a room with a person she's acting with and they can act with each other, she is improved. But when they're just like, here's this line where you have to say, Kratos, why don't you throw your axe up there? There's something that like doesn't get conveyed as well. I don't know if that's where it comes from, but it was something that was really noticeable for me and made that first trip through Vanaheim, like honestly, like nails on the chalkboard for me. I just felt like, oh, man, there's something really weird. I know she's good. What is going wrong here? There's like an inconsistency that really bothered me.
That's interesting. I think I know what you're talking about, because I think she just maybe has less lines as well when it comes to like interacting with like puzzles and stuff like that. But when it comes to the story stuff in Vanaheim, I think that's one of my favorite parts so far, strangely enough. So like just the main part that I was freaking out throughout it, because it was this really cool moment where this was the first time I felt tons of payoff for playing the previous games, because he's talking about his past to try and like, I guess, win some of Freya's just get her back on her
into her heart a little bit, right? Pulling the heartstrings.
And express how they're relatable. And he talks about Calliope. I was like, is he ever going to talk about his daughter ever again? Like, this is such a huge part of who Kratos is. Like, this is the reason that he went on this tirade to kill all of the gods originally, is his daughter. And he's never even mentioned her. And the fact that he brings up his brother, which is, I remember talking about Ghosts of Sparta, and how
Yep.
this is like this crazy side game that like I don't think a lot of people played for the PSP. He's only mentioned in that game as far as I remember. Maybe he's in 3 a little bit.
Okay.
But like they dig deep into some of the like side lore of Kratos pretty heavily there, which I
And
thought was
to comment
great.
on that, I mean, you gave me some of that, and I've heard a little bit, I guess, over the years. But obviously, as someone who's not played those, I think they nailed it in terms of giving you all the context you need. Now, obviously, when it comes to something like I lost my daughter and I was tricked into killing her, that's pretty face value. That's pretty easy to understand. But I think even with the brother and all that, those I have not played those games. I've not been there to experience those relationships. But I felt like the lines of dialogue they gave you, which are very quick, like there's not a ton of it, it's not like a huge long monologue, like totally sets the scene and gives that backstory without feeling forced and without making me feel excluded as someone who didn't actually play those games. So big props there.
Absolutely. I'm gonna backpedal a little bit. I think the only time that they do something like that, and it's in the previous game, is when Hera shows up when he's getting the Blades of Chaos. He's like, I'm not your I don't know. I'm not your slave anymore.
Sorry, who's Hera?
Hera's no, it's not. It's Athena. Not Hera.
Right.
But yeah, Athena shows up, and throughout the previous God of War games, Athena is like his the person who's she's trying to rebel against the gods as well, and she's kind of like leading him towards a lot of the things that he is doing, and throughout that series, he starts to maybe rebel against her a little bit as well.
Gotcha.
So. That's the only other nod, like heavy nod to like playing the previous games outside of like the Blades of Chaos itself. They've done a really good job of disconnecting these, but I feel like in that Vanaheim section, they like connect they bridge the gap again in a way that I thought was just effective. It was really well done.
Well, I think it makes sense too, right? Because like the reason he's here is because he wanted to erase that part of his life. So it makes sense in a way that it's not coming up a lot. And I understand for people who are super fans of the series that could be a bit disappointing because you want to feel like I played those games for a reason. And I feel like hopefully you and the rest of the people who did play those games can feel that by the end of this of, okay, they are digging into his backstory, his lore outside of 2018, and bringing that stuff into the fold in a way that actually makes sense. Like there are reasons why he's sharing this information, obviously with this Freya, as we just talked about, but like other stuff too. Like it all makes sense that it's finally coming out here, and it doesn't feel like, oh, it was weird that they did it in 2018. Like it all still kind of connects in that way. So that's good stuff.
Definitely.
Let's see, where do I want to go next? Okay, so actually, quick note on Vanaheim. I think for me, part of this too was like it was that dialogue, but I also like really wasn't jiving with the level design there. It was like, man, those plants, like I know those are
annoying.
They're supposed to be annoying, but it's like I don't know why. I don't know. Did they play test that? And did people were like, man, I love that sequence? Or was it that you're supposed to struggle with it? And that's interesting because I don't know. That to me feels like 2005 game design or something right there. Like, okay, let's get rid of that. But also to me, Vanaheim, specifically that first sequence there, to me, that was what I was talking about earlier on of like, I would have loved if that whole section was a 3-minute conversation and we got those moments between them without all these starts and stops in between of like, oh, okay, I do this combat sequence. Oh, I got to do this puzzle. I got to hit this fucking plant. Like I that's where I was like, okay, pacing wise, if we're trying to, make this game a cooler runtime, to me, that's like the first place I would go to cut. And obviously you got to fill in that context elsewhere because that's good dialogue, but it's at the cost of like this long mission that does not feel like it needs to be that long.
This is another one of those, I think, with the split between us. Whereas like I think that
we're just polar opposites somehow. We are finding more in unison here, which is I'm glad that we are finding more in common.
Definitely. Yeah. But Vanaheim, I think, has a lot of the like I do hate the plants. Don't get me wrong. But and there is one thing about Vanaheim that I find to be more frustrating about this zone than in any other zone is the gate to travel to Vanaheim needs to be in the camp. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, it's like a
like
2-minute jaunt, I think.
Every single time I'm trying to get into Vanaheim was getting on my nerves. But I think Vanaheim has a good balance of puzzle to fight. Like the ratio is enough to me. Like I enjoy those parts of the game a lot more. So I feel like anytime you had to interact with those more, it was like, okay, this is a lesser zone, where I'm the opposite. I want to fight like crazy and I want to solve some puzzles. So like I end up really liking Alfheim and I end up really liking Vanaheim, and I feel like both of those do a ton of that, and I can imagine those are probably lesser zones for you.
Well, what do you think about Freyr? This is Freya's brother. As a character, I think this is maybe another thing too. In this first scene, he's fine, but I feel like he's a character that didn't really go anywhere too interesting to me. And it's good for Freya, I think, to have a bit of this, I guess, this closure to this storyline, or like, you know, mending this bond. Obviously, is an important thing. I guess I just didn't feel like it raised Freya up to an extent that she wasn't already reaching with these conversations and her forgiveness for these other characters, and, you know, dealing with Odin and things like this. So yeah, I guess Freyr, which is, God, his name's way too close, is a character that didn't really add much to me. So when this is like the primary purpose of this first trip to Vanaheim, maybe is another reason why this mission as a whole was like maybe the weakest one in the game for me.
I'd agree there. I think she has so much going on already that it is like a cherry on top, or sprinkles. You know what I mean? Something like that, where it doesn't necessarily feel like the meat of it. Where it's like her relationship with Odin, her relationship with Kratos, her being trapped in a realm. Like all of those things feel like they hold more weight than her relationship with her brother that went south. And the fact that it is effectively fixed so quickly, that relationship.
That apology scene, weirdly written for me.
Brief.
That stood out.
Yeah, it's so brief. I think Freyr as a character is kind of fun, like, but I don't think he is this like. I
almost feel like they wanted like a cool guy in there, and that was like their best attempt at a cool guy.
Yeah, he's like the one with like the roguish charm character or something like that, and he does okay at that. I'd say I agree. I do think that her moments there when she's dealing, like, there's a side quest where she is going back through the wedding that she had with Odin, and going through all the artifacts and stuff like that. Like her moments when she's dealing with stuff related to Odin in Vanaheim are awesome. Like I love them. The fact that when Nidhogg is protecting. But I know that one's content. But like just those done to her, I think, are really, really strong. And the fact that it does give her and Kratos time to breathe and communicate, and she gets to work through her anger a little bit, I think is strong. Yeah, I really liked a lot of those moments, but I do agree that I think her relationship with Freyr seems like just not so necessary. I think maybe they brought him up in the first game as throwaway dialogue or something like that, and they're like, crap, we have to.
Yeah, I even if they did, that's something I don't remember. I feel like I wasn't like, either, okay, when are we gonna get to the Freyr sequence of this game? Yeah. You know, they are hinting at it earlier before you actually go to Vanaheim a little bit, I think, so that they're kind of foreshadowing it in some way. But yeah, I don't know if that was a 2018 thing there. One scene I really, really enjoyed is when Kratos and Freya go to visit the Norn, who are these kind of clairvoyants, and there's kind of three of them. There's kind of two of them that are really just almost have the same role, and then one who's just trolling you by like repeating your lines like right as you're about to say them. I love the scene, the way it was shot, the build up to it. Gorgeous. They're kind of creepy in a way, but of course it's also like it's really reaffirming, I think, from two separate ways, because you have Angrboda who's telling you what's going to happen, right? And then you have the Norn who are like reinforcing it. So like, I don't know, I guess from that storytelling perspective, it's like making this thing feel more real and inevitable, and that's a scary thought, obviously, as like the core part of this story is that the character you're playing is going to die. Like obviously there's a lot going on with that. So I just the way that scene was done, so
excellent.
Good.
Excellent. Yeah, like everything leading up to that, definitely a little padding. If you want to talk about padding, they give you a couple false herrings leading up to that, where you go to a place and then you fight and then you realize that they're not quite here. That part was I understand that complaint 100%. But when you finally get there, I think it feels fantastic. It's just like they are really, really interesting characters. The horse that I forget what they're called, but the horse that you get on that is like takes you through the water, a kelpie.
There you go.
They it is just like such a really like beautiful, majestic thing, and they take you through the water, and then these just like golden threads in the space that they're in. I just thought it was beautiful. And then they're just there's that one like absolutely annoying character there, and then but Kratos also coming around to being like, oh, this is my future, whereas before he's like kind of alongside Atreus being like, we make our own path, and at this point he's like, I don't care what the future is as long as I'm finding a way to make sure my son is protected. And it's kind of a little bit of a heavy moment as well, because it is him coming to terms with his reality, maybe more so than he was off of the giants' premonitions as well. So,
so another character we haven't really talked about at all yet is introduced in Svartalheim, which is Tyr.
Yes.
I really like this character. I think he's well done. He has like a much different perspective than everyone else. I do feel like, I don't know if I'm assuming this guy's not like brought up in previous God of War games. Obviously in 2018, it's like Tyr's Temple and all this stuff. I felt like I needed more context. So I don't know if there was like optional content that gives you more about him, but I guess I never could feel as invested with him as other characters. Maybe part of that is that he only joins you on a mission in that kind of one sort of sequence there when you go to the Light Elf realm, which for me was like, I don't want to go back there. I didn't like that in 2018. I don't want to go back there.
Like that
it's fine. You don't have to carry crystals around, thankfully.
Nope.
But I still didn't love that sequence necessarily. But I do like the performance of Tyr. I like the initial scene with him. I think is very powerful. He's both intimidating because of his size and his eyes, which for some reason those rhyme. But I don't know. But he breaks down very quickly into someone who's just like obviously very, very broken and has a lot of stuff he needs to figure out. But I liked he's really just there almost like comment on things, I feel like, and that worked for me. I liked having him at Sindri's house, which we haven't talked about Sindri's house yet, but I love that as the new home base. I really like the look of that. Very cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Tyr is, I think, a cool opposite side of the coin to Kratos, right? They're both gods of war. And Kratos historically has been so enveloped in just tearing a path and like letting like bodies fall where they may, and Tyr is so positioned to avoid war at all costs. So it is really cool to have the balance between them. And just how broken he is quite sad, because he's raised up in the first game as this like world traveling, like just like really well like received by everybody but Odin, and just like this just seems like the peak of godhood in that game. And you meet him and he is just funny enough so small in comparison, like he's a big guy, but he's so fragile, and he's clearly trying so hard to just like make Atreus like him, and just like feels like almost like he's looking for acceptance and throughout a lot of the early parts of his relationship with the characters. And it's just, I don't know, it's surprising. They I think in 2018 throughout the main content and some of the side content, they do a good job of building him up as this just almost all-powerful person who was like maybe one of Thor's only adversaries that probably could have done the deed. And they kind of raise him up as this, that, and this as well. It's like, no, you're supposed to lead the charge here. Like, that's you in the premonitions. But he's just like, I'm not that person. I won't be that person. And I really like his delivery. He's just like very soft-spoken. He's so he still seems to have like some worldliness to him, despite being maybe a little bit more reserved than you expect him to be, and not reserved in the same way that Kratos is, where he just like grumbles and doesn't talk most of the time. But he's I don't know. I like Tyr a lot. I
like
did not
what you mentioned of him being kind of an opposite side of Kratos, where yes, they are both gods of war, but in very different phases of their life for very, 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 very different reasons, and they've gone in different paths. But I think that's a great point. I think it it adds something to Kratos' character too, in a way that he is still so set on his ways and the presence of Tyr almost doesn't dissuade him from certain choices still, even though he's saying like what it can do to you and the consequences of that. So I think that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Of course.
So there's the reunion part in the game when Kratos and Atreus are truly kind of back together on the same team. They air some of their grievances. They work some stuff out. They find their in between of trust and things like this. I don't know if there's much we can talk about here because I think you're kind of almost just at the beginning of this part of the game, I guess. But particularly this sequence through Helheim, I really liked the twist. I don't know if it's really a twist. I guess it somewhat is, where when Fenrir, their wolf, died at the start of the game, there's obviously something kind of teased there. That Fenrir is the soul that goes into your knife, which is then teased once again in that sequence of the Angerboda, and then that comes up here as you put the soul of Fenrir into the body of Garm, who is this this crazy like realm hopping world destroyer who doesn't have a soul, so you can just pop a nice happy soul in there. I really liked that twist of that sequence. I also mentioned liking that boss fight against Garm. So as much as I maybe wasn't like, oh man, I gotta go to Helheim again, I actually ended up liking that sequence. And you're going through Helheim as well with Atreus and Thrud, and like once again, I like that sequence as well. So this whole section of the story really worked for me as well.
Yeah, really. I don't know. My dog has been running around throughout this
very cute
podcast.
I don't know if I've seen the dog before. I feel like
I usually lock her away,
but I was like, oh, what a cute dog.
I usually lock her away, but my girlfriend let her in, and she was roaming around, and she was good, luckily, because most of the time,
no barking to
like barks up a storm. But so just having this moment with this like big puppy was like very great for me. It was so nice to when you finally like do transfer, like Atreus is spending so much of that time being like, please don't kill it, please don't kill it, like we can do something. Also, it's my fault that this happened. I want to fix it in a way that doesn't cause like harm to the animal or like the realm, right? And
well, I mean, he also has like a bit of sympathy because he can turn into a wolf, so I feel like he has that element to him as well, right?
Totally. But then he does that kind of like transfer, and Fenrir is just like like Kratos is like sit, and then just this huge dog just like slams down, and you can just realize like, oh, he has this thing that is a great loss for him back, and it's I don't know, it's really nice. I haven't seen him yet, but I'm very excited to see him again because Kratos goes go home, and then he just like scratches a thing through the realm, like opens up a tear in the realms and just like climbs through it, assuming that he just like went back to their house, which is I don't know, that's just like a fun moment that he's like, okay, not only does he have the soul of Fenrir in him now, but he also is this still
powerful beast.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, great stuff for sure.
Kratos and Faye is an element of this story, you know, his wife who they brought in here, who, you know, really is not in 2018 in any way, right? Like I guess there is that one
like the image of her on the wall, like there's giant calligraphy of her.
There's a little bit of it, but in this game they actually give her a look. They gave her a voice, who is Deborah Ann Wall, who I'm a fan of. She played Karen Page in the Daredevil show. She's great in that.
Cool.
And it was funny because like I instantly recognized her, and like the mocap. She obviously was doing mocap because it looks a lot like her as well. I assume she did at least. So that was fun because I feel like I haven't seen her in anything in a while. So I was like, oh, I love this actress. That's cool to see her in there.
That's dope. I did not realize that was her. Definitely
I don't know.
A fan of Daredevil. So
yeah, I don't know how much of this storyline, because it's very intermingled. Like it's very few sequences in there, so I don't know what you've got to. I can't remember exactly at the point you're at in the game. I like these sequences. I think it adds some backstory. It's pretty classic like flashback stuff, but I think it's good to actually give a bit of character to Faye, so that I can actually feel like I have some attachment to that character. I can know at least what she looked like, what she sounded like. The way she talked to Kratos, I think, is interesting, as she's constantly trying to break him open, crack him open, to have some emotions, to have some connection with Atreus. She has to like force that on him. He's just so adverse to it. He doesn't want to open up Atreus to all of the baggage that comes with who Kratos is. So I like that element of it. It's very minimally in there, but I think for what is there, it really worked. And you know, the fact that they picked an actress that I'm a fan of probably helps, but overall it's pretty interesting.
I think it's one of the big mysteries of 2018 as well. It's
Sure.
like, okay, what did Kratos do before Atreus? Like, he clearly existed here, and he met his wife, and they built a family, and they were up to something. You know what I mean? And it's cool to just see him live and have periods of kind of peace. It seems like, where it's, anytime you've interacted with Kratos at any point in any video game, it's shit is hitting the fan. So it's cool to just see him in these moments of rest and have these interactions with another character in a way that is by choice. And it's just I don't know, a really interesting personal relationship for him.
Brock and Sindri are back, of course, and they're as well written and as fun as ever. I think in any game, if you are to contextualize the blacksmith character as actually being something that is a huge part of the story, as these characters are, I think it just makes the whole game feel much better. They are still they can teleport around. That's still a fun element of it. But I think where they try to go one step deeper with it by adding the storyline in there of Sindri and Brock, and how Brock had died at some point, and Sindri brought him back to life, but he couldn't do it completely, and he was lacking. Yep. I think it was a part of his soul, not his whole soul, but like
just a part of it.
His soul.
Yeah.
And that is something
they explain the different parts, and I can't remember all of them. I know one of them's luck, and like there's 3 other pieces.
So yeah,
he's one of them.
He's missing some part of it, and this is something that he harbors a lot of guilt for. Should he share this with him? And this is a conversation with Atreus that I really like, because I think it shows that, like, man, Sindri and Atreus have really built up a bond here. And in that particular moment, and it adds like a fun dialogue along the way when they're going to talk to Freya. I think is when that conversation is happening. And then I think maybe the one part of this that I was a bit surprised by is that when you're going to get Draupnir is when Brock, and this is what Sindri does not want Brock to go on this journey.
Yeah.
There's a couple things here. One, I think it is a bit strange that Kratos is so set on not letting Sindri go in place of Brock. It never really felt to me like there was a reason why.
I think there is.
Why is Kratos so set on that?
Because he hates Sindri. Like, one, he finds him to be super annoying, where he's like, Brock is like just easier to deal with because he's just this gruff little but then also the fact that Sindri was such a large part of Atreus lying to him throughout. Like, he's doing all this stuff on the side, and he learns that Sindri is a part of this. There's actually the journals entries Sindri's gets added to, and he's like, I am there. He said something about how he is lucky or something like that, he has been so helpful along the way, because he would have much larger issues with Sindri because of how he has interacted with Atreus thus far. He is not happy with Sindri throughout this game.
Okay, I definitely saw the element of it where he's obviously pissed at him that he is helping Atreus to circumvent him, but I guess I had never felt that he hated Sindri, so that maybe that's where I was a bit surprised by that. But then the second part of this was, to me, that maybe I'm missing this too, where I never felt like Brock had ever hinted at feeling not whole, or that something weird had gone on. He, like, as far as I'm concerned, he never brought this up. So when this happens with the Mer person, and he realizes instantly what happened and that Sindri was responsible, to me that felt like a jump of logic that I could not quite understand. So while I liked the idea of this this relationship, or like adding this dynamic between the characters, I guess I felt like there was some parts of it that felt like jumping to conclusions a bit.
Yeah, he definitely, I agree. There are parts where, and this is like throwaway dialogue, so I don't know if this is them kind of like throwing band-aids on their own things, but like there's a lot of situations where Kratos or Atreus will ask Brock a question, and he will not answer their question. He goes out of his way to be like secretive. There's a particular moment when he's talking to the other dwarf woman that's at the Vanaheim camp, and he's like, that's just something that a blacksmith doesn't talk about that. I think he's talking about Freya or Frigg, actually, or his wife.
Right.
And I'm mixing all of the F words up. I don't know. Faye. And he was like, that's part of blacksmith code, is you don't divulge that information. I'm thinking maybe they can get away with it just by him being secretive. and this being something that was like personal to him that he was just like suspicious of, but not necessarily went anywhere with it. But I agree, it does seem kind of like he was just like, oh, immediately when he realizes that she's not interacting with him. Mimir hints at it though. He does say like, oh well, maybe, or he knows something of the mermaid, or the what do they call her? Something about the blacksmiths of the mountain.
It's something forge, right?
Oh yeah. The woman of the forge, the lady of the forge. And he goes, well, sometimes interactions with that require a full soul. Or and he does kind of mention it, and that's when he's like, I knew it. So there's a couple little like nods to that being an understandable reaction, but I do think it kind of happens a little quick, and he does get there super fast.
Which I mean, if they had laid it on too thick and it was like a predictable twist or reveal or something, like maybe we would be complaining about the exact opposite thing, right? So it's like that's a hard thing to find the exact balance of. I still think overall that storyline works for me. It's just like maybe some of the puzzle pieces don't click together perfectly.
Cool character.
What's that?
The Lady of the Forge. Just a cool character. I thought.
Sure, I would like the look.
Not what you would expect it. I expected some big burly woman banging on a anvil or something like that, and like lava or something. And nope, she's a mermaid.
I like even just the way she forges things is interesting. There's like kind of wishing water around and stuff like that. It is kind of fun. This is a random Freya point we didn't mention earlier. I love that it's particularly the start of this game, but then it just exists, is that like her makeup is like all smudged and she just looks terrifying, and like she does not care at all anymore. Like she is set on this kind of death wish, or this kill wish, I guess you could say. So I like that touch of the character. We've mentioned this guy in passing, Radakovsky, whatever the name of the squirrel is. I love this character. Like, so funny. The voice acting I thought was great for it. The fact that he's like this weird interdimensional like landlord for this house is kind of this weird element to him. I love that he just like lays happily in Atreus' arm at one point. He's just like happy to be cuddled. I love this character as a weird oddball.
He's a weird, or a very strange returning character, because he's your first summon. He's Atreus' first summon. When you have that squirrel summon out, he's this like rapscallion, and he's like cursing up a storm and being really annoying. And that's when you meet him, he's like, why are you like corporeal? Like, why do you have form? And he's like, that was one of my spirits that was like,
that a 2018 thing or earlier in this game?
2018.
Okay, so that went over my head. That went way over my head, but I'm glad that there is a connection there, because I missed that part of it.
Oh man, when he like runs up Kratos and is trying to like dig in his bag, I don't know. I just thought that was fantastic. Also a great Freya moment. When she comes back and she's dressed up in her full Valkyrie armor, and she comes to like attack Kratos, because you're just fighting a Valkyrie out of nowhere, and you're like, what the hell is going on? And then out of nowhere, you start hearing her grunt, and then he's like, Freya. And then I don't know, it's just really cool moment. Yeah, totally.
I love that. That's a part of her skill tree too. Is just like Valkyrie abilities. That was to be priority. I'm like, oh hell yeah! I've invested all my points in these. I want to see Freya pop off here. That's great.
And she totally does. She like will insta kill stuff pretty much when you hit square. It's pretty badass.
Mimir, I feel like this is a character who does not have an arc in this game. Obviously, you're learning more about his backstory, what happened with him, his connection with Tyr and Ode, and all these characters. I don't think he has an arc. He doesn't need to. He is like, to me, 100% successful still. I love all his dialogue. He's fun. He adds levity when he needs to. He adds lore, backstory stuff when he needs to. He can be serious when he needs to. He has great connections between all the characters. Of course, he has dynamics with Freya. He has dynamics with, as I mentioned, like Tyr. Obviously, we've gone on this huge journey with him now, and Kratos and Atreus. He even developed some rapport with Brock and Sindri. So just incredibly successful character, so much fun, amazing performance from the actor that I do not know the name of, but you are amazing, whatever.
Seriously, you deserve more credit than that, and I can't give it.
I'll find his name.
No idea what his name. Yeah, I was like, I do not know who's doing it, but he's one of the best voice actors in the entire. Like, anytime he is on a screen, if I somehow end up like mimicking a Welsh accent, and like it is he is just a blast to listen to. And yeah, he consistently brings great context to every single moment you're in. The moments where he is not around are kind of a bummer. I always love Mimir, what Mimir adds to a moment. Like you said, he doesn't have and clearly he doesn't have one throughout the game, which is totally fine, because the moments that he is just like able to add just little bits of knowledge and backstory about every environment you're in, every situation you're in. He does a great job of being the most knowledgeable man in the world.
Yep. Alistair Duncan is the voice actor name. Shout out to him. I think you make a good point too, where obviously in 2018 there's several hours of the game where you've not encountered Mimir yet, but then from that point on he's with you the rest of the thing. And this game too, like obviously anytime he's not with me, I'm like I'd be happy to have Mimir along, but I think the game does a good job of mixing up the party you're with, right? Obviously between the two playable characters, but then also just like the people that are with you at different points in time add just like more variety to when you're exploring. Different characters are going to be commenting on things. And so it was one of those things where like they take Mimir away at points and then bring them back and you're happy to have them again. So I think they do a good job of pacing that kind of thing. Kind of related to that, something that ended up annoying me where, in the first game in 2018, we've talked about this, how like in the boat sequences, you're getting all this lore, dialogue, conversations that are happening. And the game's pretty smart about it, where if you arrive to your destination, they'll say, oh, we'll pick up this conversation later. And they do. That's obviously great. Like that was a very smart writing thing, implemented in the game well, makes it feel real, all this kind of stuff. One thing I think they saw that people liked that, and I almost think they went too far at some points, where there is a lot of dialogue in this game, which is characters commenting on things that you are doing, whether it's Brock saying, oh, Kratos, that's not their way to go. That's, he's saying that's not the critical path. That's, to do this. Or characters saying like, oh, look at all this loot. We're going to go get this loot. Or, Heimdall says that, oh, you just pick up anything not nailed to the ground. There are moments of this that work, but man, they needed to dial it down. Like 25% of the lines that they put in the game is how many they should have put there, because eventually it becomes too video gamey, where you realize that it's like a thing that is programmed into the game and doesn't feel real and part of the world anymore. So yeah, I think it's good, it's smart, but you just got to adjust the rating of it. This happened with Horizon Forbidden West as well, where Aloy does not shut up, and it is so aggravating at times to just not let you exist in a space or solve a puzzle or whatever it is. It's the same thing here. Every time you're on fire or frozen, someone's going to tell you, Mimir is going to say, Kratos, you're frozen, brother, whatever it is. Like, you will know. And I'm sure for accessibility, this is probably a good thing in a way that you're being told these things. And maybe if there's an option, you can tone it down or something like that. But I just had to call that out. It's both a positive and a negative.
It definitely serves a purpose at times. There's definitely been a few moments where I've walked towards a zone and been in this thing and trying to like screw around with it and realizing you're not ready for this yet. You don't have what you need. That's great information. But like, I don't remember how many times I told Freya to shut up. Yeah. Like while she was like, especially specifically in Vanaheim, like you're talking earlier.
Why don't you throw your axe over there, Kratos?
Yeah. I know. It was so many situations where I went, I know. Like I clearly see what I'm supposed to do. You do not need to tell me right now. I do wish I could tune.
Don't forget to block, Kratos. I got that one a lot. As someone who forgot to use a shield. Oh my god, this game did not want me to forget. Or I think it goes too far too when she's like, "Ooh, you can parry." Like, I'm like, oh god, please stop this. Like,
in fact, I'm using the parry shield. I'm aware.
But you don't do it once, and she reams you out for it. Totally. My last point is a very kind of random one. Obviously, there's a lot more notes I have here, but I'm saving it for our next podcast. Is the journal in this game is, where you go to get your quests and stuff. But you can also go in here, you'll get like the classic codex entries. I think these are really well done. You can tell that the writing team is not just giving dialogue to these characters, but they're writing everything, because it'll be a thing where you get the codex entry when you meet Sif for the first time. And if you go in there and read it, it's like Atreus writing in his journal as if he just met this person from a very realistic point of view. And I think it adds a lot to the characters, and it gives you it shows you what their perspective of this person you met is. I didn't read everything by any means, so maybe there'd be some in there that don't work or something, but generally when I went in there, I thought it was pretty cool that this stuff is written from the perspective of these characters. And I also just like having the journal as context of why, like the context for the menu, I thought was pretty cool as well. So shout out to the game for doing that.
it's pretty cool when you depending on what character you are, the codex entries are different as well.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, really neat that like you have Kratos's perspective, but then you can go and check that same journal entry when you're Atreus, and it's a completely different.
They absolutely do not need to do
very neat.
that, but it's a great addition to have, and it just
Totally.
like that's a lot more work. You're having to wait in a way. You're having to write twice as much for certain
Absolutely.
things, but they go to that level of detail, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, really, really liked the journal. I've read a lot of it. I've read a lot of it. I was surprised. I've been like elbow deep in the lore in this game, and it's been they give you good payoff. I don't know. They really flesh out the characters well in this.
Dante, do you have anything else to say? We have cleared my notes up to that point in the game, so I think I'm ready to hold back and come back another day.
20 hours or so, I feel like, and to get some more to talk about. So
well, I'm
yeah,
curious to hear when you've like I want to hear more about like some of these side quests that you feel are, because if there is any that are very good, I like this is or when I was done 2018, I was done. I turned the game off. I'm out of there. I do not care about this bonus content in this game. After I beat the game, and it's kind of the similar to the first one where it doesn't fade to black. It's just like credits roll, and then it lets you do stuff, whatever. I was like immediately next day I came back and did some more. I think that's a testament that I like this game more than 2018.
Yeah,
because I was not done with it the moment I saw Corey Barlog or whatever name popped up on screen first there. So yeah, any other notes from you that you want to tackle?
I'd say let's get into some of the side quests the next time. I have a few off the top of my head that I already think are like stellar additions. I will say that I think the side quests are much stronger this time around. A lot of times in 2018, you're just like walking up to a spirit and he's saying, "Hey, my brother did this, and go find him." And it's not really adding a ton of effective stuff to the game. Whereas this one has like huge side quests that I think at times blur the lines between being a main story quest. Like Mimir has actually like a few moments now that I think about it, like where this is totally about him. There's really neat world building in the side quests this time around, and entire zones that you don't even access unless you do side quests.
Right.
So they very heavily expand on the world you're in as well. Like there's doors that you can completely ignore. And
I think that was
entire new zone.
That was the case in 2018, where when we were talking on our retrospective, there was 2 areas that you guys were talking about. I'm like, I had never been there once, so I'm sure this game does that. Even if the main story does take you to like every realm, I'm sure there's like huge level design areas that you would not explore unless you're doing that bonus stuff.
Yeah, they give you it's really, really good payoff digging into the side quests. They make it worth your while. It doesn't feel like just fluff by any means.
Love it. Good stuff. Okay, we'll call it there for today. And I don't know, pretty much when you're done, let me know. And then we will do another.
It'll be soon. It'll be soon.
Yeah.
I'm digging in deep.
It'll probably be like a shorter and just spoiler discussion on probably the rest of the story. If there's any other gameplay stuff, we can talk about it. But thank you so much for joining me. And we will be back again soon, everyone, for some more God of War, some more side quest goodness, all that good stuff. We'll see you soon. Later.
See ya.